Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I am back with a brand new edition of Digging Through Discographies. Now, we've been going over the Stone Temple Pilots discography, starting with their debut album, Core, which was received by mixed reviews, but also has been the highest selling album of theirs to date at over 8 million copies. Now we are on the second album, but if you haven't watched the previous video, I highly recommend it before you get into our talks about Purple. So, despite negative reviews from some critics, Stone Temple Pilots continued to gain fans. They toured for 4 weeks, opening for bands such as Rage Against the Machine and Megadeth. 1993 brought continued success on the road, with the band headlining a 2.5-month American tour. In 1993, the band filmed an episode of MTV Unplugged where they debuted the song Big Empty, which would turn up on this new album. In February 1994, the group won Favorite Pop/Rock New Artist and Heavy Metal/Hard Rock New Artist at the American Music Awards. In the spring of 1994, Stone Temple Pilots returned to the studio to work on their second album, Purple, which was completed in less than a month. This particular album does have the grunge sounds, but did also bring in some other genre influences, such as psychedelic rock, country, and blues rock. The album had 3 singles: Big Empty on May 22nd, 1994, Vaseline on June 1st, 1994, and Interstate Love Song on September 9th, 1994. And the album was released on June 7th, 1994 by Atlantic Records. Now, if you remember what I said last time, Core, I love that album. There's a lot of great songs on there and ones I definitely go back to. But if I did have one complaint, it would be that a lot of songs did feel a little bit similar, even if the arrangements were interesting. You know, Sin, Piece of Pie, Wicked Garden, Plush, Dead and Bloated, all those songs felt a little bit similar. And the interludes didn't really help the cases of those songs. In fact, it made those 5 or 6 songs feel even more repetitive, and especially when you got to Where the River Goes at the end. Eventually you felt like you run the gamut of this sound. However, this particular album does a little bit better in its diversity. You do get some hard rock/grunge songs, especially the first song, Meat Plow, where it is hard-hitting rock, but it doesn't feel too sludgy. Also, from this first song, you realize that Whelan's voice doesn't have the grime or the power on the bottom end as it did on the previous album. Now, whether that's a change in style or due to his drug issues that are very present on this album, I'm not exactly sure, nor am I going to speculate, but I would not be surprised if his heroin addiction did mess with his voice a little bit. If I was to, give an example of an artist that did have something happen like that, Chet Baker, phenomenal jazz singer and trumpeter, got to a point with his voice at the end that he basically was mumbling and very incoherent with his lyrics on the ending albums that he was on, as if he lost a lot of teeth or his lips were puffed up. So heroin does have an effect on the voice and how people sing, and that could definitely be a reason why he lost some of his gruff. That being said, the quality of a voice is still very interesting and fits very well with the sound. If anything, that might be a reason why these songs don't feel as grimy or grungy as some of these other songs on the previous albums, but it still works well. Meat Plow is a fun opener. Vaseline also does have a little bit of that grunge style there too, though it does have a little bit more psychedelic rock tinges in there. Same with Loungefly. This one has more psychedelic rock with a little bit more bombastic drums. Something that also stands out on this album is the drum work on here is much more interesting. Songs like Loungefly, Interstate Love Song, Pretty Penny with the hand drums, Silver Gun Superman, Unglued definitely has some fun drums. Army Ants feels like a Spin Doctors song, a very 90s drum beat, especially with the drum fills themselves. There's a lot of standout drum parts on here, which is really nice comparatively to the previous album. What is so great about this album is the diversity in sound. Like I said, the first 3 songs feel a mix between the psychedelic rock and the hard rock, such grunge rock. But then you get Interstate Love Song, one of my favorite songs of Stone Temple Pilots, and a quintessential 90s song, especially even in the style of the music video that feels very 90s. This song is very country / southern rock with some great harmonies on there. Then you got Still Remains that has this, again, a little bit of a tie between the hard rock and the psychedelic rock in there. The melody is beautiful. This one is a very underrated song to me. I love the lyrics on here. The melody is fantastic. The bass line on here is fantastic. All of it makes for an amazing and underrated song. Then you get Pretty Penny, which feels a little bit like a Led Zeppelin folk song, kind of like Dancing Days, but very interesting arrangement that has this open bridge part that works so well because the bass line does this pedal tone idea where it's on E the whole entire time. So it gives the chords around there a chance to be able to add some more colors to there. Where it starts with this E, and then it goes to this E over A, and then this E over A sharp. So it gets this chance to be able to make for a very interesting part, and that stands out through a lot of these songs, is that there's a lot of simplistic ideas, but it is so interesting to me. Going back to Interstate Love Song, where you got the going to an awesome chord progression of waiting on a Sunday afternoon with what are we between the lights of this C sharp minor going to G sharp 7, B to F sharp 7 to A. Beautiful chord progression on here. Even Still Remains of this F in the chorus to D to A. So goodbye for dreams of water that's late. If you should die before me, ask if you can win a friend. Pick up power, hold your breath and drift away. All these songs on here, fantastic. Even Pretty Penny. So like it's a E to a G, but like the tones above it, you get this C sharp G idea. Very simplistic ideas on here, yet ones that work so well. And I still have a couple other songs on here. Silver Gun Superman goes back to that hard rock sound and has a fantastic chorus that is so simple. You told a lie, and I know it was mine. So a D to a D minor 7 to a C to a D to a B flat C D. So many cool ideas on here. I love Silver Gun Superman because of the beautiful chorus. The bass line on here is one of the best ones, and the solo at the end is fantastic. Even though there's this weird change in meter at the end, honestly, all awesome. Big Empty, a bossa nova-ish ballad, kind of like Creep. Why I love this one a little bit more than Creep, even though Creep has a little bit more of a tender sound to it. Big Empty has this very interesting bossa nova, jazzy feel in the verses, and then goes to a more hard rock feel in the chorus. Whelan changes his stylistic approach in the voice as he goes through the song, from something very soothing to something a little bit harder. One of the best songs that So Devil Ballas has done. Unglued is perfect for the name. It is this very fast-paced, hard rock, grungy song that is a lot of fun and is very straightforward, really fast, and just goes really well. Army Ants is very psychedelic in sound and is a little bit weird, but is another one that has fun with it. Yeah, the drums are fun. It just sometimes it feels weird about how it's traveling between these styles, but a nice touch on here. And then finally you got Kitchenware and Candy Bars, another one that is a ballad that starts out very simple with this idea of I know where to go. Somebody show me. I was the last to know. Very simple yet fun. It builds well with a bass part with the drums, with even some string parts. I just wish it was a little bit longer. This one actually ends a little bit too abruptly for me. I wish that there was a little bit more, unlike with Where the River Goes. But there's also this nice cheesy song of My Second Album, sung by a lounge singer, Richard Peterson, that kind of has this Johnny Mathis kind of style. It's just this cheesy song about what's on the album, and it's a nice little touch at the end. It doesn't neither help nor hurt this album. The CD has so much diversity in it. It has so many very interesting arrangements, and again, it still has that crunchy sound, that jazzy sound, without necessarily having to be full-on grunge. I love a lot of the bass lines. Some of the bass lines on here are absolutely fantastic. Robert DeLeo does a fantastic job on here. This is some of his best work. Yeah, there were some great bass lines on the previous album, but these ones stand out so well. Whether it's the counter melody ideas on Big Empty, or if it's the arpeggiated ideas on Still Remains, the improvisational nature of Interstate Love Song, or even the ones that just do the same ideas as the guitar and make for very interesting bass lines, whether it's, the verses of Silver Gun Superman, or the ones that follow kind of the same nature of like Unglued, but does enough different to make it stand out. Each one of these bass lines, for the most part, has a lot of good nature in it and a lot of character that, if you were a bassist and were looking to find a way to stand out rather than just being someone that does the same four notes all the time, this is an album that you should listen to hear how a bass can play around the arrangement rather than just have one particular function. So many great bass lines. I want to learn all of them, honestly. The lyrics are very interesting as well, because a lot of these have to do with Whelan's addiction to heroin, and basically a lot of them have that feel about dealing with these problems. Whether it's Interstate Love Song, where it's from the perspective of his first wife, Janina Castaneda, as she's dealing with his heroin addiction and dealing with him lying to her. Or if it's Still Remains, where it's talking about his love with Janina and the fact that he can find stillness with her. And that one, to me, has some of the best lyrics about love. The chorus is one of my favorite lyrics of all time, which is, "If you should die before me, ask if you can bring a friend." It was such a poignant lyric about love and about wanting to be with someone through thick and thin. Vaseline is talking about going through the same shit different days, and that's having to deal with his addiction. Silver Gun Superman is literally talking about his addiction because silver gun is a slang for a hypodermic needle. Big Empty is talking about the conversations that he has with his wife in the car, the awkward conversations about his addiction and how he needs to get over it. Unglued is about Whelan's dependence on heroin and his lack of self-control in there. There's some pretty poignant lyrics there where moderation is masturbation, one is what, and one makes you feel good. And Kitchenware and Candy Bars is kind of like the culmination of everything that has been going on in this album, where it's talking about wanting to do what he needs to do for his wife. What I wanted is what she wanted. And that idea of wanting to be clean for her. A lot of these lyrics, I didn't really know the meaning of them until I actually went through it. And it's just really interesting to see how much of a narrative there is on this album. And it brings a much deeper meaning to this album that I already loved. There isn't a bad song on this album. I would say that to me, Army Ants and Meat Plow are my least favorite songs, and those still have some relevance in this album. Fantastic one with so much diversity. If you felt like the first album had a little bit just too much of the same stuff, then this is a perfect album for you. Yeah, it's not the most grunge sound, but it builds a lot of different ideas and a lot of different diversive genres that make for a lot of really interesting songs. And it's actually a perfect segue into what the third album will be. So when you think of the second album, it's definitely a nice bridge between their grunge sound and what the third album is going to sound like. I won't talk about that just yet. That will be next week. But just keep that in mind. Building off of the foundations laid by the band's debut album, this album was a huge success for the band, debuting at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart and remaining there for 3 weeks, eventually selling over 6 million copies. The radio-friendly Interstate Love Song quickly became a big hit, spending a record-setting 15 weeks atop the album rock tracks chart. Big Empty peaked at number 3 on the US main rock chart, number 7 on the US alt chart, and number 50 on the US air. Vaseline peaked at number 1 on the US main rock chart, number 2 on the US alt, and number 38 on the US air. Interstate Love Song peaked at number 1 on the US main rock chart, number 2 on the US alt chart, number 18 on the US air, and number 22 on the US pop. Ungaloo peaked at number 8 on the US main rock and number 16 on the US air, and Pretty Penny peaked at number 12 on the US main rock. By October, just 4 months after its release, Purple had sold 3 million copies. In 2005, Purple was ranked number 438 in Hard Rock Magazine's book of the 500 greatest rock and metal albums of all time. In 2006, the album was ranked number 73 on Guitar World magazine's list of the 100 greatest guitar albums of all time. In May 2014, Loudwire placed the Purple at number 6 on its 10 best hard rock albums of 1994. And in July 2014, Guitar World ranked Purple at number 24 in their super unknown 50 iconic albums that defined 1994. 1994, you'll find out it was a big year for hard rock, which we will eventually go over a lot of that stuff. But this was a quintessential album for them. One that, although didn't have the sales that Core did, is one that definitely got them on the map, and in a less controversial way. This is better than Core. Not to say that Core was bad. Like I said, I at once had Core as one of my 3 favorite albums of all time, and I realized I just messed up. It wasn't Core. It was actually Purple. This is almost a flawless album to me, even though I would say Loungefly, Vaseline, and Meat Plow are some of the weaker songs on the album. They are still great. And when you have, your 9th best song being Loungefly, it's still a solid album. I can't find really any complaints to this album other than, personal preferences on some certain songs. But the diversity there is much better. They've worked much better with each other. Robert and Dean working so well, helping each other sometimes and balancing off each other at different times. I think with that, it gives the band much more room to experiment, and did so well. And even Eric Kretz does more experimenting as a drummer and comes up with some great drum riffs. Whelan, even though he doesn't sound like he did on Core, doesn't mean that the gruff is the selling point. He's still a great singer without that gruff. And you'll see his voice keeps changing as the years go by, partially due to just different styles, also partially due to his addiction to heroin. This is, like I said, fantastic album, very poignant lyrics about a very poignant time in his life that will be continuously come up throughout the remainder of his time with Stone Temple Pilots. I love this album, and it's crazy to think that this album was only recorded in a month. It just shows, kind of like with what we talked about with Linkin Park, where even though Hybrid Theory is the more popular album, that Meteora was the more polished album. Same thing here. I think this is a little bit more polished than Core. And because of that, I'm going to put number 2 Core and number 1 Purple. And that is my time for tonight. Sorry for gushing. I love this album. I love this band. And I hope that you can at least see why. If you do enjoy this album, give this video a like. Let me know what you love or hate about this album, or your favorite memories of this particular album. And, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to hear me gush more about other bands and other discographies, the best way to do that is by subscribing, so that I know that you are interested in what I do and want to see more of what I do. Also hit that bell button so that you are notified of other videos I'll be putting out. And just keep on watching my videos. So next week, I will be back with the third part of the Sticking Through Discography, where we look at an even more different sound from this band. But until then, this is the Music Fan, and I'm signing out.